Welcome to Life Chapters Money Choices, where we explore the turning points in life that really change everything and the money wisdom that helps us navigate those turning points with real purpose. I'm Michael Avery, and today's episode is rooted in, I think, one of the oldest pieces of wisdom that we have. It's etched into the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, and it's echoed across centuries. Know thyself. Today we're going really deep with someone who's built a life, a business, and a legacy around helping others do exactly that. Colleen-Joy Page is an international coaching trainer, a business builder, an artist, and an Enneagram practitioner, and a longtime client and collaborator with our very own co-host Kim Potgieter, who's also with us. So from the power of purpose to pricing with integrity to how understanding your inner wiring changes the way you approach money, this conversation has it all. Let's get into it. Well, Kim, you've described Colleen as one of the most influential people in your coaching journey. So I'd like to start there. Colleen, welcome. I want to begin with the story that you've told publicly about that moment when you were 13 years old and you asked yourself a question that most adults wouldn't even consider asking. Can you just take us back there to that moment?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, 13, depressed, really suffering a bit of an existential crisis, just started high school. I had many physical scars from multiple surgeries in the earliest part of my life and was extremely introverted and started the journey of asking those big questions that we tend to ask, I think, when we're suffering. Questions like, what is the point? What is the point? What is the meaning? How do I navigate this thing called life? And I was lying in bed crying and really considering exiting, but didn't want to put my family through further trauma. They'd been through a lot navigating my health challenges, and a peaceful, let's say, without, it's funny, it was probably quite a profound experience, and yet it was very ordinary in the moment, where I'm sure a lot of people have felt sometimes in life, it's as if a more peaceful inner voice breaks through the noise. So I think that might be the simplest way to describe it. And the thoughts sounded just like me, except they carried the texture of something more grounded, something more comforting, more steady, more stable. And literally was the question and the opportunity. If you choose to stay, if you choose to live, choose a reason that is bigger than the pain. And I think when any of us face really tough transitions, tough life experiences, that's not a bad question to ask. But there I am, 13 years of age, pondering this for a moment, and I can't tell you why this particular word showed up, other than the fact that it represented answers that were deeper than perhaps just information, because I had tried to find some answers. And the word was wisdom. So I dedicated my life to the pursuit of that elusive, nebulous concept. Naive but passionate, and somehow by making that decision, it already started to feel better to be here. It started to feel like there was something I could do. And from that young age, I remember going to the then Alberton Bibliotheek to start taking out books on all sorts of different subjects, and the librarian used to look at me a little bit funny and stamp those books a little too hard because they were books about comparative religion and, anything I could get my hands on. And that's been the path, Michael. It's been a long journey. I've just turned 54. I've had the good fortune of working with teachers and thought leaders. And what's also very interesting, I suppose, is that the first 20 years of my life, let's say, were more philosophical, more spiritual. And then I found myself exiting that and being deeply immersed in the grounded reality of working for multinational enterprises, building a business myself, becoming internationally accredited, and being let in boardrooms. And I say that with tongue in cheek, but finding myself discovering that wisdom belongs everywhere and in fact
Yeah.
is sorely needed.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
you joke about that being let in boardrooms, but often when I chat to executives and you raise a topic like yeah, Enneagram personality screening, and they think you're some esoteric and they
Yeah.
want to chase you out the room, and we'll come to that. But I think, really, Colleen, and thank you for coming on and for having that bravery at a young age. I think it's rare to meet someone who's had such clarity at that age, and that stands out for me. But what really strikes me is that your path wasn't paved with privilege, and you've said before that you didn't grow up with wealth. So how did your early experiences with scarcity, if you were to look at yourself in the mirror, shape your relationship with money and meaning and that purpose, that nebulous concept as well?
I'll give you a metaphor that literally, and I'm going to say the word wisdom quite often, but for me, wisdom is clear seeing, very simple. And for me, wisdom isn't knowledge, wisdom isn't words. It is that moment where you see something so clearly that it settles everything and we get to embody something called wholeness. So when I have faced my money baggage, which there was a lot. I was born and raised in Alberton, and for those folks that are listening, the culture was that anyone with money was a snob and was either corrupt or was just over there. It was an us and them,
Yeah.
north-south story.
Yeah. No, it's a very working
and
class neighborhood. I grew up in Brackendowns.
well, my cousins were there, so maybe you knew my cousins, right? So, yeah, and what I didn't realize, and this is something I bumped into as I started to heal, let's say, some of these inner obstacles around money, and realize that I had inner obstacles. One of the things I realized is if you picture a valley and a mountain and a summit, we were taught, and I'm sure there were definitely people with less, there always is, but I would say my family were just below middle class. You know, when you're buying secondhand school uniforms and where the occasional chocolate is every 3 months and really dignified grandparents living on counting coins and putting them in little envelopes under their pillow in their bed. So this valley, let's say I was born somewhere just, let's say, the top end of the valley, looking up at all the wealthier and wealthier. And the programming was everyone above you is somehow less than you, and there are snobs. And my epiphany was actually realizing we were valley snobs and that there was some kind of unspoken loyalty to where you were born. And there was this, I remember getting my first little car in my 20s that was an old Ford Escort that if you closed the door too hard, the rearview mirror fell off. It was and my family made such a fuss over this little car. And let's say fast forward 10, 12 years, I've healed a lot of the inner obstacles. I'm actually starting to make some real income. And I bought myself a decent car, and none of the family said anything. And I remember when I moved into a beautiful home, and not only my doing, I had a second marriage with a husband who has more access to income and wealth. And I'd invite my family, and I felt this strange discomfort. And it took me many years to work to make them comfortable. So, what I've realized is that we do have an unconscious family or systemic loyalty. And I think sometimes this holds us back because we're almost, it's like wherever you're born on that mountain of money, you're taught you should stay there. and you have to stay there to belong. And I think this happens all the way up the mountain as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're born a little bit more affluent, you can't suddenly not be there. There's this pressure to stay where you are. And then one of the wisdom insights that really freed me, freed me first in the level of mind, but then I had to learn to embody it as well, was that true financial freedom was the ability to stand anywhere on the mountain and be equal to that, and equal to anyone else standing there, not judging plus or minus, and equal to as in not rejecting, not pushing against, or grabbing either anywhere you were. And I remember actually at the time of working on this, have a friend and colleague who has lived the most incredible life, and he had a multinational business and was doing really, really well for himself, but also doing very meaningful, purposeful work. And I remember something he said to me that really stuck. And he said, Cole, I could live in a tent, I could live in a mansion, both are fine. And he had done both.
Yeah.
And I realized that that was the real freedom, was if I could get myself to stand in a room with people who lived further up on the summit and not feel anything change inside of me, not feel myself feeling this attractor, like this magnetic push-pull, which happens when we're not equal. And if I could also, shake the hand of my domestic worker and feel also that same equal to on the inside, that would be the job. And that's what I worked on. And what astounded me was that with every passing year, as I became, let's say, more equal to different types of levels of income, my attitude towards wealth changed into custodianship, and it changed into realizing that there is you pay a price for wealth. I don't think, if you're doing it with integrity and wisdom, obviously, because you gain complexity.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But
and then you have to get equal to that also, right?
But Colleen, just on that point, it's so interesting listening to those insights, and not knowing much about the Enneagram work that you do, but the fact that when you describe that mountain and feeling uncomfortable in different, on different levels of that mountain, maybe with the ultra wealthy or someone who is less fortunate than you, it's often because we externalize our value. And so we're basing our value as a reference point against, so I have less than or I have more than. And what I'm hearing you say is when you internalize that value, then you are your own reference point. And so therefore you can be comfortable wherever you are. And it's just, it just dawned on me in this very moment that really should be the lodestar for what we look for when we talk about purpose. I want to come to you though, Kim, because you trained with Colleen for your ICF coaching qualification, and you really have walked a long road with her over 2 decades, I think. When you think back to that time, what did she teach you, not just about coaching, but about being a coach yourself?
So, Michael, it was long before coaching. It was when Colleen was in her more spiritual part of her journey. So, yeah, I think we are definitely over 2 decades. It was actually before I had decided to go back and study to become a financial planner. It was when I was on my journey of working out what I wanted to do with the next part of my life. And that whole purpose conversation and where I was going to add value was something Colleen started in me. Also, just working with me around my intuition, working with me around looking internally to myself about what I was going to add value. So that same journey. And then what was beautiful for me is I went off, studied all the traditional things, my postgraduate, went into financial planning, joined Chartered, and then I started looking for a way that I could bring Colleen in. And this was the interesting part. She's saying, a financial planning company, but we wanted to talk intuition. We wanted to talk Enneagram. We wanted to talk coaching with the staff. Just go back 15 years ago. It wasn't heard of in the financial planning industry. So we always have this joke between us that we brought her in and she came in disguise, and we used to talk coaching and we used to talk other words. But in real fact, what we were doing is we were bringing a soul to Chartered Wealth Solutions. And I've got, so that's why I've got way more than coaching to be grateful to Colleen for. I mean, she's helped me at Chartered and she still works with all of our team. And it's around bringing that soul into our business and helping us to be those different financial planners that are not just the one-sided, this is the right tax structuring, this is the right liquidity, this we need to have you offshore. We are whole people, and we're working with our clients around this kind of philosophy.
And let's face it, I mean, a lot of that planning, it's specialized, it's important, but it's fairly commodified. And I think when you connect with that purpose, that key motivator, I mean, we're human beings and we respond to stories and storytelling and emotion more than we do to spreadsheets at the end of the day. So, Colleen, I want to bring you in on that point because it's one of your real kind of, shall we call it superpowers, the Enneagram. For listeners who aren't familiar, what is the Enneagram in plain English, and how can knowing kind of things like your type change how you relate to money and success and finding that purpose?
So the Enneagram is one of many personality profiling typing systems available in the world. It's very popular. And because it's very popular, you do get the good, the bad, and the ugly versions of how it is used. You get the very superficial, perhaps the drive-through versions, and then you get the versions that have some depth. When it is understood well, the Enneagram is not there to put you in a box. I always joke that it actually shows you the box you're already in.
Right.
And if used well, can give you a path out.
Yeah.
Because the self-awareness that you gain when you realize, wow, this is something that describes the patterns of my personality. Now, I created a simple metaphor because you're right, Michael, metaphors are part of the human language, right? They speak to something deeper in us. So the metaphor of the pearl is one that has been most useful with the kind of Enneagram work that I train and that I work with. So a pearl, as most people will know, is formed around a little grain of sand where the oyster coats that irritant and layer upon layer of mother of pearl, and eventually you have this beautiful pearl. It's quite helpful to think of our personalities and the Enneagram types in a similar way. And so when we're studying our Enneagram, we are finding that core motivator, that core driver. It is not about behavior. Many people make that mistake. They think that the Enneagram is why I do something, well, what I do, but it's actually about why do I do what I do. Yeah. So all types could be helpful. It speaks to the deeper motivator. And if you think about everything in nature, a low functioning apple tree is struggling because it's not getting what it needs to grow. Every Enneagram type is a kind of pattern of personality that when you identify it, it's like identifying an apple tree is not an orange tree. Now you know what it needs to grow. And if you give it what it needs, it can grow out of the struggling, surviving, lack state into a more flourished state. So when I've worked with leaders, for example, last year, we ran an Enneagram initiative, initially for an exco of a multinational consulting firm. And then they asked me to work with, we ended up typing 393 people in the space of 2 months. And what I realized is that when somebody has that aha moment, when it clicks, and they go, oh my word, I've just identified this is an apple tree, I'm a 9, or I'm a 3, or I'm a 7, or whatever it is. The next thing you give them is, this is what your particular Enneagram type needs to grow, and this is how you understand what drives you. Now, in the money conversation, isn't that key?
Yeah.
Because if you know what your drivers are, that, for example, a green pearl is driven by an unconscious need to be seen in a way that doesn't provoke shame. Whereas a blue pill is driven by the mind's need for information to appease fear. So there's this intel gathering driver. And the red pill needs to have this somatic, physically felt sense in their body that something is okay. Otherwise, they have a natural resistance to change, to making any new growth in their life. And these simple insights, when packaged in an easy way, give people that aha moment for themselves, for their own growth. And then relationships become also key, because if I get you, if I get, like Kim and I, we joke together, she's a 3 on the Enneagram, I'm a 9. So the worst of 9, and I know this in myself, is the tune out zombie apocalypse version of Cole, which I was very intimately familiar with in my young years. And a 9, when a 9 is unhealthy, tends to be so tuned out that they're not present at all. And the reason is it's an avoidance strategy to avoid impact. And so you'll have very calm, peaceful people that disappear. Whereas my growth path is to actually balance my 9 with what Kim is at her best, which is 3, which is entrepreneurial. And it's, a 9 will send an email, whereas a 3 will pick up the phone
and execute. Absolutely. But Colleen, I mean, and you mentioned there is, there's superficial Enneagram work, and then there's the deeper work. And I think, often when you look at the critiques of Enneagram work, it is that, oh no, we just risk reducing people to a number or a box or a label. And there's also this idea, and I think I've seen it in boardrooms, I've seen it at Bry's, where people like to use their type. They use their type as a shield. Oh, I'm an 8. I just speak my mind. Or even worse, they then label others and then they box them in. How do you keep the tool from turning into a justification machine or a personality prison? Because I like what you said earlier. Yeah. You're just trying to reveal where you are so that you can help maybe transition into another space where you need to be.
So I'm going to say a controversial thing, and as every 9 pattern in me doesn't like rocking the boat, but has learned to be braver about it. I think the tests are a big part of the problem. The Enneagram tests out there, and look, and to be fair, they have a place. They look like a solution to get the typing quicker, but they only have, in my opinion, a 50 to 60% accuracy. And alternative to the test approach is a narrative approach. And the narrative approach is to have a conversation with someone where you educate them so that they discover their type in partnership, which is different to you do a cold test, it spits out a report that may or may not be accurate. And the problem with the tests, Michael, in my opinion, is that because people don't realize they're not accurate, they use them the same way they might any assessment tool for hiring, for promoting, for this labeling and boxing. And the labeling is just done. Doosh. Okay, well, the test says you're a 7, therefore you're a 7. Now we're going to treat you accordingly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the danger, right? That's a real disservice to the fact that obviously you're always more than your Enneagram. It's just something that is telling you about, let's say, your operating system, if you want to use another metaphor.
Yeah.
So I prefer the narrative method. I prefer the human touch of empowering somebody to have their own aha moment, their own understanding, so that they can also discover it. And then you also, in that moment, have the opportunity to give them that deeper insight so that they don't treat it as an excuse, but they rather treat it as a growth opportunity. Now that I know this is an apple tree, I know it needs this much water, it needs this much nutrients. Maybe I've been giving the wrong things to my kids. Maybe I've been maybe I've had a blind spot as a leader, thinking all my team members need the same because of my Enneagram. So this is
Yeah.
the deeper gift, really, is to realize, gosh, there are these let's say patterns, and when we learn them and when we get each other at this deeper level, then it becomes an empowering tool. And Kim can tell you, I mean, at Chartered, certainly, and many of the clients I've worked with for years, the gift can be, instead of pointing at each other, we put the personality on the table and we point there. So it can become a language to diffuse tough conversations,
Right.
to speak about needs. It can become a language of, so yeah, it can be a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, oh, well, I'm just being a 9 today. But it's also a safe way to say, hey, I'm being a 9 today. I need some solo time, or
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a way to talk about needs. It's a way to do that. And one other thing that just blows my mind is that the Enneagram cuts through culture. It cuts through gender. It cuts through, in other words, no matter where I've trained this in the world, no matter the context, no matter who I've worked with, even I've worked with facilitators who work with autistic children, the Enneagram shines through the culture. It shines through all the beautiful, different, diverse expressions of life. So it becomes a common language. It becomes a way of realizing, yeah, there are layers of other influences. Of course there are. But it shines through.
That's
So
remarkable.
you see the 8 pattern, or the 1 pattern showing up no matter where you are. And I think that's something quite liberating, and it can be it's got its own gift to connect us via personality.
And that universality, I think, it speaks to something far deeper at play here. And Kim, I know you've spoken often about how Enneagram has helped you with your own internal money story. Can you share an example of how you've used this awareness and how it shows up in your own coaching or planning conversations at Chartered?
The 2 things, maybe just to start with myself. Michael, I do realize, I mean, and all the work I've done, that every test tells me I'm an 8. I am a 3, and I know it because of the Pearl story that Colleen was talking about. So very much for me, a 3 is showing the world that I'm successful. I've also always got to be aware of the shame that I have. I have a lot of shame from my childhood, and that can always be triggers and work with me. So I will know when I'm out of my values, when it's more important about what other people think than it is around my internal work. So I've done this myself, and that's why it always makes it so much more meaningful for me when I'm working with not only the staff at Chartered, because I think that's also a very important element to this, and then also with the clients at Chartered. So we're not able to do the Enneagram with every one of our clients that comes in. It would be far too long. It's just something that we recommend. We do a much shorter personality assessment, but we do it because what we want to show our clients, and this is the most important part of this kind of discussion for me, is that you are your greatest asset. Not your money, but you're your greatest asset. And spend enough time discovering, as Colleen mentioned, this is a journey. I mean, it's been many years of journeying to be able to stand up here or sit and tell you today that I'm a 3 and I have shame from my childhood, and that a lot of it is how I appear to the world. So, but it's been a journey for me to work through, to heal. And so when I'm working with clients, I say, go and be curious, discover the Enneagram. But we have to do a much shorter personality just to bring to them that the self-awareness is one of the most important things in planning your next chapter, because as we go into this next chapter, it becomes vital that we have understood ourselves so that we know how we should be showing up. We've had discussions before, Michael. It's no longer just about success.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of conversations around significance, and we can't get it without this beauty of understanding ourselves and finding our pearls.
Yeah, absolutely. And, reminds you of that conversation we had with Andrew Mackey and Bob Buford, Success to Significance. And Colleen, I can't wait to have you back on, because there's just so much to unpack around this. So I'm going to use this as kind of our first intro to our audience with Colleen. And I've got to ask you then, just as we wrap up, if you fast forward to today, I mean, you've built a coaching business with global reach. I mean, you operate in 60 countries. And I meet a lot of people who say, I want to be a coach, or I'm trying to be a coach. And they're not very, to be frank, they're not very successful. And yet your clients often find you, and it's not the other way around. And in an age of TikTok coaching and kind of 6-figure funnel promises, how did you build something so soulful, yet also so commercially successful? I mean, I'm sure it's not one thing that you can put down to your business success, but what would you say has been key to it?
So I'm going to use a nature metaphor again, and this is what I teach many of our aspiring coaches as well, that to not do what everyone else says to do. They tell you pick a niche, perfect a product, and promote using the 6-figure funnel approach. And that's not a natural, organic way to build a business. Instead, you have natural conversations. You show up as a human being. You custom build solutions for the person in front of you. And you become obsessed with serving at the highest. And I think once you see a pattern emerging, that means you get a yes from the same kind of people for yeses for the same kinds of products. Then you put marketing behind that, and you build funnels, etc.
No, but it's sometimes repackaged. If you listen to corporate consultant speakers, customer centricity or fine, but honestly, it is finding that purpose that resonates with you, that gives you that wisdom, that clarity of thought that you mentioned. Colleen,
Thanks,
thank you so much. I mean, this has been just a real masterclass in your own wisdom and humility, and just that power of knowing oneself. So thank you so much for being with us, and for showing that you can build a business that's as profitable as it is purposeful as well. So I really look forward to having you back on. To our listeners, if the conversation has sparked something in you, maybe it's time to listen to that nudge, whether it's changing your career or deepening your self-awareness, or just finally picking up a paintbrush. We didn't even get to chat to Colleen about her painting, but don't forget that the power really does all start with you being really intentional and making that conscious effort. Don't forget to subscribe as well to Life Chapters Money Choices wherever you get your podcasts. And if the episode resonated, share it with your friend. Share it with someone who's standing at the edge of their own next chapter as well. Until next time, I'm Michael Avery, and remember, your money story is part of your life story, and you've got to write it with intention.